Well, hello there, and welcome to another week here at the My Endurance Hub. Uh, Question and answer, also known as the coaching consult. Um, we have we have these quizzes that people can fill out and give us some information, and they can get a coaching consult from it. I know a lot of you have signed up, and the response has been amazing. And our time slots fill up, you know, within a few seconds of them going out. And that's really encouraging. And what it tells me is that there is a need or a want for one-on-one or real-time coaching advice. And what's cool is you can consider these question and answers basically the same thing. You're joined by a few other like-minded individuals. So I have to get through a few questions. But the neat thing is those things function as the same type of thing. We're going to dive into whatever's whatever you're curious about, whatever you have questions about, and we're gonna help you solve those issues and hopefully give you some good answers. So my name's Jasper Blake, and I'm the head coach here at My Endurance Hub, and it looks like a few people trickling in, which is great. Just a reminder that these videos are recorded. It's just my face on here, so you don't need to worry about that. But they're recorded, and we do that so that if you want to go back and review the questions and answers later, you can in the back end of My Endurance Hub. And also, if you have friends that might be interested in some of the topics that we cover, to please send them our way. Anyway, great to have you on board here, and let's get cracking. Looks like we have James and Ayrton. Ayrton, we're long overdue for a connect, but we'll get there. Great to have you on here, and yeah, let's make it happen. We're going to set you up with a little bit of a program. It sounds like you're off to the races, and you're pretty, you've got a good little system set up. But I'd love to connect with you, when that works. So let's jump into the first question here from James. What are your thoughts on training with a weighted vest? Have you ever done it before? Well, that's a good question. And yes, I have used a weighted vest. Now, for endurance sports, I'm not necessarily sure it's not a necessity. Certainly training with a weighted vest, yeah, you take it off and it's going to feel easier. It might add some load too that, will make some kind of a training effect. But what I would really caution you on is using a weighted vest for things like running, where you're already weight bearing and the impact load is very high. And I can say that from personal experience. I got a great story for you. I have a buddy that I train with over the years. He was actually a professional cyclist and very, very high level cyclist, amazing athlete. And he really got into running in the last, probably 20 years. And so we run together quite frequently. And I think it would sort of annoy him that, because part of triathlon is running. So my ability to run was a little higher than his, coming from a cycling background. And so he'd show up every once in a while and he'd hand me a weighted vest to wear. And, in the spirit of good fun, I would wear it, and he'd say it was like 10 pounds in there, and it was probably 30, and he got a good kick out of that. But it kind of evened things out a little bit. But what I did end up running into was some injury problems, and I don't know if it can be directly related to wearing that weight vest, but I would inevitably end up with some kind of calf issue. And it happened a couple of times, and it seemed to be directly correlated with wearing that weight vest. So I don't know if it was the smartest choice for me, especially for running. However, that said, maybe for something like cycling, to add 10 pounds and go do hill reps, you're going to get an added, training stress there, a little more pressure on you there. I certainly wouldn't wear it in the water. The goal in swimming is to, primarily to stop yourself from drowning. So maybe don't wear a weighted vest in the water. Of all the places, maybe the only place that might make a little bit of sense is on the bike, especially if you have, a nice tight form fitting one that you can fit your clothes over top. then maybe, yeah. But no, I don't think as a general rule, it's a thing that, the top athletes use in endurance sports. But in other sports like CrossFit and, maybe if you're in the weight room and you're looking to get much stronger, you might put that on to add a little bit of load. Especially for something like pull-ups, or if you need to challenge yourself a little bit more in certain areas, then yeah, maybe a weighted vest is good. But for endurance sports, I don't know. I don't think so. Okay, Aiden says, can you talk about motivation? How do you stay motivated to train, especially when you get tired? Well, yeah, that's a great question, and I think it has maybe a multi-part answer here. So I think one of the first things that you need to establish are what your goals are. If you have really clear set of goals, short-term, long-term goals, then it's a little easier to check in with those goals when you're starting to get a bit tired, and just remind yourself why you're doing this thing. If you don't have a clear direction and you don't have a real reason to train when you're tired, then it's an easier out. But if you have a really clear goal, you're like, hey, I want to run this marathon. I want to do it in 3 hours and 30 minutes or something. And I have some clear steps along the way. And I know that through the training, part of the process is that I'm going to get a bit tired. I'm going to get a bit fatigued. Well, then, yeah, you have that in place. Then when you do get a bit tired, you can check in and say, well, this is part of the process. I know I'm going to be tired on some days. And but I know if I push through, then hopefully that goal is more attainable. That said, I think if you are the type of person where like 99.9% of the time you're super motivated, it's not a problem for you to get up and do the workouts, and then maybe there's a couple days where you're lacking that motivation because you're tired, it might actually be a sign that you need to listen to your body, and you might need to actually take a little break. So sometimes that lack in motivation, particularly if your norm as an athlete is to be very disciplined and on target and you never miss workouts, if you're always checking the boxes and then you're having a day or two, maybe even 3 days where that motivation is starting to wane, you might actually want to heed that. You might want to pay attention to that and take a little break. It might be your body telling you, hey, it's time to step back a little bit. So, it's this fine line we always walk in sport where we need to get tired, we need to get fatigued, we need to put on training load, and then we need to recover. And we walk this fine line of, hey, am I motivated enough? Am I committed enough? These are conversations we have in our heads all the time. Do I need to just like suck it up and get it done? Or am I actually just like really tired and my body's telling me to step back and take a break? It's a really, fine line to walk. So, yeah, anyway, I hope that answers your question. I think there's other things you can do too, to get motivated. Like, let's say it's not that you're, too tired or fatigued. Maybe you just need to listen to some good music. I mean, I know that sounds like a real simple fix, but sometimes some good music will get you pumped up. Sometimes it can be nutrition. Maybe you actually just need a little bit of carbohydrate, a little bit of food to kind of, get that engine firing again. It's not necessarily a simple question to answer. It's sort of, it depends on the situation. I think you got to really evaluate, what's going on internally, and then take it from there. Ayrton says, yeah, let's connect in the coming future. As you know, my first Ironman will be in Victoria, May 26, 2024. I am already training. However, I do not overtrain. I do not to overtrain. Maybe I try not to overtrain and get tired by the time the race comes. I am training and being careful not to get injured. Yeah, this is great, Aaron. It sounds like you have a pretty good handle on what your body's telling you, and maybe the feedback you're getting, and maybe you also have a good handle on how much training load you can actually handle before you need a little break. And May is a ways off. Where are we at? We're November, December, January, February, March, April, May. You're about 7 months away. So, that's a nice time window to start really being committed to your training, 6-7 months for sure. But also it's far enough that if you put your foot right to the floor, put the gas pedal right to the floor, yeah, there's a chance, 6 months from now, you might be a little fried. So you have to kind of walk that fine line. And Ayrton, what I would suggest is just making sure your training has some rhythms, some cycles to it. So maybe you're doing a couple of weeks of heavier training load where it's like a little progressive. So you're kind of inching up a little bit. And then you've got an easier week there where you maybe cut the training volume down, to about 60 or 70% of what you normally do. So those cycles are really important. They keep us on track. They keep us on the right side of happy and healthy. And really, that's one of the fundamental principles of how training works. We apply some training load, some stress to our body, and then we give it the space it needs. We give it a little bit of space to recover, a little extra sleep, a little less training stress, a little some fewer workouts, some less hours, and then inevitably, when the body does its thing, it kind of over corrects in a way. It overcompensates, and we actually get a little bit fitter. So that training of adding stress and then, backing the stress off is actually what makes us fitter. So it sounds like, Ayrton, you have a really, really good handle on that. Aiden says, do you normally train with a partner? What are the pros and cons? Yeah, yes and no. So when I was in the thick of it, now I almost, now I'm pretty split. I have a couple of kids and I'm running around, I'm living the dad life. And so the challenge with that is coordinating with people. My schedule is largely determined by work and, making sure, I'm there for my kids. So, coordinating with people isn't always possible. So I would say right now I do half my training with people and half my training without. I'm fitting in a workout wherever I can. When I was racing as a pro, I actually did probably 75% of my training on my own. A lot of those miles were on the bike. I really enjoyed getting stuck into exactly what I was supposed to do. And one of the drawbacks to a group sometimes is that, you get sucked along with what the group's doing, and it might not necessarily be exactly what you need to do. Now, when I was doing Ironman, that was quite true. Like in Ironman, you had to be really disciplined on pace and your nutrition, and, the training load would get very high. So you had to really kind of stick to what you needed to do. Now, on the flip side, something like Olympic distance triathlon, which by its nature is much more dynamic. The races themselves are, it's like crit style racing on the bike. So you're in a big group and it's like, you're always having to accelerate and get on wheels and like chase gaps down. And, you had to be a lot more dynamic. So the training needed to reflect that. So you maybe wouldn't be as served as well if the event you're getting ready for involves a lot of kind of play with people. So when we were training for Olympic distance, we would be, more in a group setting. And, that really kind of helped, bring up the level when it needed to be brought up. I think in a group, you're probably more willing and able to push yourself a little bit harder when there's other people around. But again, something like Ironman, it wasn't always the goal to really push yourself as hard as you could. The goal was to get as fast as you could down at the energy system or the effort that was required for Ironman. So it was two kind of different things. Adding to that, I would say, another time I would fit in groups is some of my most successful training was when I actually trained with groups that were outside of the sport of triathlon. So I would train with runners and I would train with swimmers, and I could kind of go into those groups and get the energy systems I needed. Mostly those were the harder workouts. So if, I was training with a swim team, on Tuesday, Thursdays, I knew they did really hard kind of threshold type sets. And so I would jump in with them, and I found that a very productive way to get my swimming to come up. Likewise with running, I would train with groups on the harder days because it was easier for me to kind of push myself and be kind of dragged along to faster paces with other people. But for the longer, slower stuff, maybe I needed to be more disciplined in the other direction. And so those were often easier, on my own. So I was kind of a mix of both. And I think most pro athletes probably are, to be honest. They'll use people when it makes sense to use people. I don't mean use in this, in the not nice way. I just mean like, lean on a group when the group is going to pull you to a place that is going to be helpful. And then other times when maybe you need to dial back a little bit, it might make more sense to be on your own. So sometimes, it either makes sense. It's not a one size fits all, I wouldn't think. That's a good question. Thank you. Ayrton says, as you know, I am 6'8" and 246 pounds. Ayrton, you are like two of me. This is amazing. Well, actually, no, I'm taller than 3'4". But yeah, wow, 6'8". This is amazing. I need to be careful with my knees and ankle. Should I train at this point at 50% load and increase it in January? Well, yeah, it's hard to get into percentages without actually knowing exactly what you're doing. And that's why I think a connect with you would be really important. What I would say is, just make sure your training, first of all, is really progressive. So, a guy your size, where you're probably going to run into the most issues is from running, would be my guess. It's very high impact. You're a big guy. So every time you go up in the air and land on one foot when you're running, that's a lot of load on that leg. So what can you do? Well, you can spread that training load out. My recommendation would be maybe to take a day in between all of your runs. So maybe you run Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then maybe one day on the weekend. So maybe just like 4 runs a week. So you have space in between those impact load days. And that will maybe help you stave off injury, or at least keep that impact in a manageable place. Making sure your running is really progressive, and that means from an intensity standpoint and a volume or like duration standpoint. So, don't try and do really hard workouts and really long workouts all at the same time. Make sure, over the weeks between now and your race in May, it's really progressive. So I'm not sure where you're at right now. So I wouldn't say you just need to go, okay, I'm going to just train 50% of what I'm at. I don't necessarily think that's the answer. What I think is the answer is making sure that your progression is really smart. So, maybe no more than about 5% added volume, especially on the run each week. So, if you did 100 minutes of running this week, then, no more than about 105 minutes of running the next week, which is a very gentle, small progression. But sometimes people get, they want to rush that process, but you don't really need to. They can be small increments. Of course, we don't, increase indefinitely, or a year from now, you'll be running, 3,000 minutes a week. We don't want to do that. We kind of have some upper limits. And then you can challenge it in other ways as the body gets better at handling that impact. You can add in a little bit of intensity. I really love using hills as a great way to get some intensity, because the impact load is a little bit lower when you're going up. You can just be very gentle on the way down. You can even walk on the way down to kind of manage that impact a little bit. So yeah, it's not a simple answer. Maybe we can dive more into it a little more specifically, for your particular needs, Ayrton, when we connect. I have one other thing to say about that, but I can't remember. It'll come back to me. Okay. James, it's a good question though. Thank you. James, is there any treatment you have tried in the past that has really helped you with recovery? Like sauna, steam, IMS needling, physio, yoga, anything you really recommend? Well, the one thing that people often leave out when they think of recovery is sleep. Sleep is hands down the single most important recovery tool that we have. You can't get around it. If you're too light on sleep, or the sleep quality is not good, or maybe your sleep hygiene, we call it sleep hygiene. What are you doing before bed? Are you sitting on your computer screen right up until you go to bed? Are you eating a big meal right before bed? There's a few things you can do to make sure that sleep quality is very high. And it should be long. The longer the training that you have in the week, that sleep needs to be a lot, and it needs to be high quality. Give an example. When I was at peak training volume, which was anywhere from 30 to 40 hours a week, when I was doing Ironman, I was 10 hours a night and a 2-hour nap in the day. But I was training like, 5 or 6 hours a day sometimes. And I really needed as much sleep as I could. So yeah, top tip is sleep. From there, there's all kinds of avenues you can go. So, you can talk about, sauna and steam. I don't necessarily think those things fit into recovery, more into heat adaptation, a type of stress on the body that's just going to make you fitter. I think if you go for a hard workout and then jump in the sauna for 20 minutes, that's just kind of adding a stress. So it's not really a recovery tool. But what it will do is increase your sweat response and, kind of help make you fitter by applying another stress. Same with steam. IMS needling is more of an injury, something you'd use to mitigate injury. So it's not necessarily something you're going to use just as a general recovery tool. They're using IMS needling when you have some issue that needs to be repaired. So yeah, that's a form of recovery, but it's more like a form of like helping you get over an injury. Things like physio, yeah. So you want to take it to a really high level. Yeah, I mean, if you're the top athletes in the world, golf, basketball, triathlon, whatever, they probably are regularly seeing physios to make sure that there's no muscular imbalances, to make sure, there's, any little things that are going on can be adjusted or worked on. And they're probably in there whether or not they have an injury. The top athletes are probably seeing physios, chiros, whatever, massage for sure, on a weekly basis. Now, that might not be accessible to everybody, time-wise or financially, but certainly that would be the gold standard. My assumption is if you're, the top golfer or basketball player on the planet and you make, really good money and you're with a big team, you probably have physios, massage, chiros that are all basically part of the team, and you're probably seeing them whenever you need to see them. That might be multiple times a week. So yeah, those are all part of the recovery strategy. One thing, you didn't really mention here was just like light stretching, but I guess that fits into the yoga compartment. People are kind of mixed on whether stretching is good or not. I found for me, there were certain muscle groups that responded really well to a stretch and others that did not. And so, yoga, I did go through phases where I did quite a bit of yoga. And like anything, if you overdo it, you can injure yourself doing yoga. And I certainly did that. But when I found that nice balance, I found yoga a really great way for me to, kind of facilitate some recovery. So yeah, I think it's partly finding what is the right thing for you. But first and foremost, sleep needs to be at the top of that. Nutrition certainly as well is a big part of recovery. Timing your nutrition after workouts, making sure that you're fueling during the long workouts is also important, so you don't dig a big hole. Lots of ways that we can incorporate good recovery there. James says he's following it up with any tips if you have a hard time sleeping to try and fall asleep faster. Yeah, I mean, check in with your sleep hygiene. So here's a few little tips on good sleep hygiene. One is your room dark and quiet? So we got blackout blinds about 10 years ago. It was a game changer. That our room is very dark and very quiet. Is the room cool? If the room's too hot, it can affect sleep. You want actually the room to be quite cool. That's like too hot. It makes sleeping very difficult. Screens before bed is so challenging. Like even I'm guilty of that. I think I want to do a good job of it. And then I'm like, oh, but my alarm's on my phone. Well, I should just get an old school alarm clock. Like having your phone or any kind of screen in your bedroom is like a recipe for not sleeping well, because that light going into your eyes before bed is not great. Maybe the thing's buzzing at night and kind of disturbing your sleep. I mean, get those screens out of the room. I say that knowing that sometimes my screen is in my room. It's like an unfair fight. We're sort of fighting against these AI, kind of supercomputers that are, know how to trigger the parts of our brain that just keep us coming back. And so, just being disciplined with that, all you got to do is leave the phone out of your bedroom, and it probably solved that problem. So, anyway, timing of eating, like if you have a really big, heavy meal right before bed, probably affect your sleep. You want to back that up a little bit. So there's a few ways that you can check in with sleep hygiene, and maybe we'll post an article about that. That would be a good one for us to do some tips on how to sleep well. Falling asleep faster, I think that backs up with all the things I just said. If you do all those things right, you'll probably fall asleep faster. Sticking to a schedule is really important. So like if you going to bed at the same time every night is really important, and waking up at the same time every morning is really important. I do have a little mental kind of rehearsal, sort of words that I say to myself if I want to fall asleep that work, and they're mostly designed around just getting the body to relax at different levels, and I'll use that, and that can really kind of, speed up my ability to sleep, which is nice. So, but yeah, if sleep goes sideways, everything else goes sideways. It's like, it's just ingrained in us. It's like evolutionary. You can't get around it. You can't, fake your way out of no sleep. If you don't sleep, I don't know what the actual statistic is, but if you don't sleep for X number of days, you basically just die. I'm not laughing. That's not funny. But I think that's a thing, eventually your body will probably just fall asleep. But if you can't, it's like real trouble. And it happens not in a matter of years. It's like in days. If you don't get sleep, it's really bad. Okay. Ayrton says, thanks, you got it. Yeah, we're talking about Ayrton's running. Running is the hard part for me. Could you comment something about stretching before the running? The importance of stretching and for how long and what kind, dynamic or static? Ayrton, this is such a great question. So in the old days, we used to do what we call a static stretch, kind of before everything. And that's where you stretch a muscle, you hold it for like 30 to 60 seconds, and then you let it go. Well, that's not great if the muscle's not warm. So the prescribed routine that I would give people prior to running, so someone like you, Ayrton, what I would suggest is that you actually walk in and out of your runs. So maybe the first 5 minutes of every quote run that you do is a walk. And what this does is it really gradually wakes up those muscle groups. It kind of really helps facilitate a very gentle warm up for you. And then the first 10, 15 minutes of running should be really, really easy. And I haven't even talked about stretching yet. So we want to actually warm up the body really well before we do any kind of stretching. Now, I don't do any kind of stretching if it's a long run. Usually on a long run, if my body's feeling really rigid, I'll walk a couple minutes, 15 minutes, really easy running, and then I'll kind of work my way into it. And then I'll do a bit of a static stretch after. If I'm getting ready for something like a track session where I need to really run fast, then yeah, a little bit of walking just to get the body going, 15, 20 minutes of really easy running. And then there's a whole series of dynamic stretching. So dynamic stretching is when we move the muscle in and out of range very gently and progressively. So a dynamic stretch, if you ever see like swimmers on the pool deck swinging their arms around, they're basically just doing dynamic stretching. And like anything, we want to make sure that that's progressive. So if you're, coming off the couch and you're tired and the body's a little rickety, well, don't swing your arms into full range of motion right away. Those first few little arm swings should be very gentle. And then we work our way into a little bit more range. Same thing with any kind of dynamic stretching you might be doing in the lower body. Like a leg swing, for example, needs to be very gentle. Muscles need to be really warmed up before you do any of that dynamic stretching. So dynamic stretching is something that we use prior to wanting the muscle to exert effort, and a static stretch would be something that we would do, kind of at the end of a workout. So that's a really good question. And, I think it's an important consideration. I think also determining what's right for you. So I'll give you an example. My pre-run routine now has actually evolved. When I was younger, I could literally just go to the door, run 15 minutes easy, and then I'd be right into a hard set. Just like body was fine. Now, my pre-run routine actually involves using a foam roller for 5 minutes. So I kind of wake the muscles up with a little bit of foam roller. And then I'll walk 2 to 5 minutes as at the start of my run. And then I'm 15 minutes of super easy but technically mindful running. And it's only then that my body starts to be like, oh, I'm feeling good now. But I'm 50, And so with time, I've had to sort of adapt. Now, I coach a couple people who are older. And that warm-up routine actually is a lot bigger. I have one guy in particular who's learned that he needs to spend 30 minutes on a yoga mat before going out. And they're not even stretches. They're kind of like core activation. They're like, hip stability work, like some little muscles in the hips and the core that need to be switched on before he runs. And so he'll spend 30 minutes before a run going through this whole routine on the yoga mat. including some foam roller. And then the first 5 minutes of the run are a walk, and then he's into easy running. So his whole pre-run routine is quite extensive now. I think it's an age thing partly. And, with age, we also get wiser. Maybe that's smart also if you're 20, but when you're 20, it's like, here we go. So I really like that question though, Ayrton. It's a really great question, probably very personal for everybody. But certainly given that you seem to maybe experience a little bit of issues with running, you're a bigger guy, having that pre-run routine nailed down would be really important for you. So I hope that helped answer your question there. It looks like that might be it for questions. I'll maybe give it 30 more seconds here if anybody's got another one they want to pop in there. Always grateful for people popping in here. Ayrton, we'll make it happen. We'll connect. And James and Aiden, thanks so much for jumping on board as well. It's always wonderful to have everybody here. These sessions really jazz me up. I get very excited. And reminder that if any of the content in here might appeal to some of your friends, please send them our way. We just hit 1,400 members. I feel like every week we come in here, we're 100 more. So it's very, very exciting. Oh, Ayrton's just following up. I'm 58 years old. Hydration during running. How often should I have water? Oh, yeah. So another question here by Ayrton. Yeah, it depends on the length of the run. So, if you're doing 30 to 60 minutes, you actually don't really need anything. We've got enough carbohydrate reserves. And, as long as we're not super dehydrated going into a run, you're going to be fine. But as soon as you start creeping around 90 minutes, certainly over that, then yeah, you have to be more mindful with your hydration intake. And I'm always a fan of using a sport drink because it has the other two things that we need, which are carbohydrate and electrolyte or sodium. So, if you're doing a run that's an hour and a half or longer, maybe even an hour or longer, having a little, water flask with you that has some sport drink, something that you enjoy the taste of and works with your gut, that, sipping, every sort of 5 or 10 minutes so that through the hour you're through a bottle that's small bottle, 500 to 750 mils of fluid. If it's super hot conditions, like you're in Florida and it's 35 degrees and humid, then, your consumption might need to be higher. But certainly when I was doing my long runs and I was being very disciplined, yeah, I'd be sipping every 5 to 10 minutes. I'd carry a bottle. You'll see there's a lot of hydration packs you can get now, since in the last decade, the ultra running scene has really exploded. And along with that has come equipment to help support people. See a lot of people wearing these packs that are actually very comfortable, and they'll have water flasks that you can carry. And yeah, the longer something goes, the more, disciplined and diligent you need to be with what you're bringing into your body. So small amounts frequently, Ayrton, small amounts frequently, never too much at once. Just a steady stream of water, carbohydrate, and sodium for anything longer than say an hour or 90 minutes for sure. Yeah. Okay. Looks like that might be it. Oh, Ayrton says, thanks. Always good to learn with you. Have a great week. Much appreciated. Yeah, thanks, Ayrton. I really appreciate you jumping on here. It's always great to have some good questions, and we'll connect. Okay. So it looks like that might be it. Thank you again, everybody. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you next week. May change the time of this ongoing to 11 a.m. Pacific time. It seems to work a little better with my schedule. So, but we'll let you know. Okay. Have a great week, everybody. Happy training, and thanks for jumping on.